Hi, I'm Jack. This is the second video in this series about my A-level Computer Science NEA. I scored 70 out of 70 for my project, and hopefully I can help you get a high score too. For my NEA, I decided to build a computer game with some basic AI based on an old abstract strategy board game. In this video, I'll be looking at identifying and utilizing stakeholders in your project. Stakeholders are a key part of your NEA. They help to define the project requirements, provide feedback on prototypes, and validate the final solution, providing vital evidence of iterative development. Now, stakeholders should probably be people who have an interest in the project and can be impacted by it. They might be family, friends, teachers, students, people involved in a clever hobby, a small business owner, or a subject matter expert. Sometimes identifying stakeholders is easy and obvious, and they're a real help in developing ideas. Don't panic though if you don't really know who to involve, don't have many people willing to participate, or their feedback is kind of non-existent. No one actually checks up on your stakeholders, so if you need to make some of them up or provide some additional answers on their behalf, that's okay, just make it believable. Remember though, that it is often actually really useful to have someone else testing out and giving feedback on your solution. So do try and get preferably at least 1 or 2 real people involved. In my case, all of my stakeholders were real people, but I provided some of their responses. If I had an idea to improve the project, I would have one of my stakeholders suggest it on my behalf. This allowed me to make them look more involved and valuable than they sometimes actually were. It also made it look like I took their feedback very seriously and that the project evolved because of it. In my first stakeholder section, I began by introducing my stakeholders, justifying why they should be involved in the project, and explaining how I would include them throughout the process. I devised a list of questions to ask them about their abilities and preferences, although, depending on the sort of project you're doing, you may want to focus more on their needs and requirements, and I justified why I included each question. I then listed each of their responses and afterwards analysed their comments, discussing anything they said that might be useful to my projects, and also any suggestions I was given that I didn't think would work. Be sure to act on at least some of the feedback you were given, but of course you don't have to take every suggestion. If you decide not to do something though, you should preferably explain why that is, even if it's just as simple as, I don't have time to complete it in the project scope. I had a second stakeholder section in the analysis section as well, where I asked further questions after doing my research. This did only include 4 questions, but the point was to show that I was involving my stakeholders at every stage, and I was making use of what I'd learnt from my research. I followed the same structure of justifying each question, listing responses, and then analysing the comments. They were again asked for their input on the look of GUI during the design phase, and this was recorded in the same way. I then decided to get further feedback from stakeholders at 2 additional points that I thought were critical during the development process, as well as their final review of the game as a whole. I really recommend involving your stakeholders as frequently as possible and implementing their ideas as often as you can into your project. I even made some extra revisions based on their final review in the summative testing section, and ended with a brief paragraph to confirm they were now happy with my solution. Their inputs should also feature in the evaluation and development sections, so they are very central to the project. Stakeholders can be critical in providing a real-world justification for your software and should be the driving force behind a lot of the analysis, design, and evaluation, so make sure you make the most of what you have. Well, that's the end of the second video in the series. There is a link to my NEA in full below if you want to check it out, and in the next video I'll be looking at the research section.